So I didn't think I'd be returning to this in this little series I've been doing, but this was actually a thought I had about Goblin Slayer. Like normally he's the main reason why I like the series and some of the characters that surround him, but then I thought about something which was the world of Goblin Slayer actually has a certain appeal to it that I think writers could learn from. One I would say is how minimalistic it can be, or I perceive it as being minimalistic. Like there's a moderate amount of lore to it. Like it's heavily influenced by Dungeons and Dragons, I believe. It's pretty obvious at this point, especially the one-eyed monster you see him fight in the sewers. Um, and yeah, I thought I would just do another video talking about it and why I think there's something to learn from that. The first aspect I would like to talk about in this brief video is the mystery. Like the lore of Goblin Slayer is not that expansive or extensive or in depth to my knowledge anyway. It's been a couple. I think it's been a year since I read Goblin Slayer, and as with most of these videos, some of this is going off of memory. But yeah, there is mystery to it. Like there is information given, but not a whole lot of context to it. Like for instance, where do goblins come from? Goblin Slayer was told by his sister, and he later repeated this around a campfire once, that he believes they come from one of the moons of their world, the green moon specifically, which you should be able to see on the image. Um, and the reason why they come from there to Earth, or his world anyway, is that their world is barren. It has nothing that can sustain life. And they look at the world he lives on and they are jealous. They are green with envy. Another thing is the gods that they have. I don't remember seeing much, but then again, I've only read the manga, so I don't know much about the deities of that world. There's gods of order and chaos, and there's the Earth Mother, like different groups of deities, I suppose. But not a whole lot is given, so there is some mystery to it. Like, there's a demon king or a demon lord, but Goblin Slayer is not supposed to fight that person. That's the hero's job. He's like, not even a side guy. He's more like someone not on the top of the totem pole. He's just a guy getting by, I suppose. There are armies of demon kings. There are territories for the humans, the dwarves, the elves, like for different species, and the lizard people. About that, but other than that, there is some ambiguity to it, which I like. I think it's good to leave an air of mystery to it, or at the very least, don't reveal everything up front. It gives some people reason to come back and hope for more to be elaborated on in the future. Now, I don't know much about goblins and fantasy lore, but as I understand it, they are usually seen as not big of a threat. It's just something that you deal with at the start of your journey, and they're very small fry enemies. Like they're not something you give much thought about. They're something you swat away like a bug, and then never really give much thought to or afterthought at again. With Goblin Slayer, it kind of took them and put a twist on it. They actually show that these things can be a very how do I put this? They can actually be a force to be reckoned with if there's enough of them. So in some ways, they're like, oddly enough, I would say Darkspawn from Dragon Age, in that a few of them are no problem, but you get enough of them together, they can do some serious damage. And yeah, they should not be taken lightly. And yeah, it's just like it took something that was normally not even an afterthought. It was just something you dealt with at the beginning of a story or a game, and then you never dealt with again. And this one, they are a major threat. There are tiers of difficulty to them. Like you have goblins, you have hobgoblins. I believe you have goblin lords, goblin paladins. Well, one goblin lord and one goblin paladin. I have no idea if there's more of them, but yeah, there's also that. There is room for the imagination. There's room for expansion, really. Like you do hear how there are these gods who long ago would roll dice and would just make decisions based on the roll of the die or something to that effect. But you never hear much about them. You just know there are gods of order, gods of chaos, And as far as I know, that's all. And I think it's also hinted that all of this just takes place in a D&D game that someone's playing. I believe anyway. Like that's kind of the hint it's hinted at the end of Goblin Slayer Year One, the book. It's like one of the only Goblin Slayer novels I actually read, and I believe it's also shown in kind of the manga of Year One, but I can't remember. I have to go back and read that again because it's actually a pretty good manga. So there's room for expansion, but there's also room just for the reader and the people you're entertaining just to fill in the blanks of their imagination. Like it can be what they want. I kind of like this. Again, it's very minimalistic. Like I kind of like that. Like normally I'm someone who likes it when there's a lot of lore to take in, but at times I think the lesser amounts of lore helps the story so it doesn't detract from the main story. You can better focus on the main characters and what's going on in the story. Like, actually, that's all I can really say. Like, there's room for interpretation, which I like, at least until the author of the story expands upon it and gives more for you to look at, or at the very least elaborates on. Then you have to get. Then your imagination makes new conclusions based on what's been provided. And lastly, the takeaways. Like I do think lore is important to like world building, but it doesn't have to be there doesn't have to be too much of it. Like there can be a small amount of it, and it can still work. Goblin Slayer, I would say, is the best example of this. I mean, the lore is later expanded upon, but it starts out small, and while it's been expanded upon, it still feels kind of small like, compared to other fantasy stuff that I've read. There's not as much to Goblin Slayer, which I like. I like the fact that there's more focus placed on Goblin Slayer and his associates and love interests. Well, sort of love. Maybe love interest is kind of seeing too or trying to put too much to something. But yeah, him and his character. Like I like that there's more focus on them instead of just like the gods and the stuff that happens in their world. Like it's more like stuff that's just that stuff is referenced mainly and is not the main focus. And I like how that's the focus instead of like the world, what's going on in the world in general. If there's more of a focus placed on the Adventurers Guild and the people associated with it, and I would say that is the most important thing about Goblin Slayer. Instead of oh, you have these deities, you have these lords of chaos, you have these goblin lords, like you have all that. And lastly, I would say it's also interesting how it takes something that is normally looked down upon as not a threat, the goblins, and it takes them in a new direction. It makes them into an actual threat. So look for unconventional enemies in your stories, I guess. Because it took some enemies that I would have never, well, not me, but some people probably never saw could be an actual threat and the main evil force in the story, goblins, and they made them into one. So, try to put a twist on something, I suppose. And that's all I can really say. That's the end of the video, and have a nice day. Remember, the game was rigged from the start.